Hi, thanks for watching video number 2. Again, if you're not familiar with me, my name is LayLa Johnson, and at the beginning of the pandemic in April 2020, I was in a horrible biking accident in which I became a paraplegic with traumatic brain injury. And if you watched video 1, then you know that this is an account of the horrible, dehumanizing discrimination that I faced as a Red Cross volunteer who was newly disabled. I have mixed feelings about making this video because it's really hard for me to go through. It's really hard for me to even believe that this really happened to me, that this is all real, that the Red Cross is standing by their actions, and I don't know, it's really hard. And the other thing is that, you know, it also, I want to make this real for you. I want you to understand. I wish I could communicate the pain that I have gone through and just make this a real experience for you. I wish that I could just say that I was discriminated against and it was horrible, and for you to be like, oh no, that's so horrible, I can't believe they did that to you. But you don't have enough information to really, I just want you to feel it. I just want you to understand a little bit of what happened to me. So we'll kind of get started from there. So in 2020, at the beginning of my accident, I was just, I was oblivious to most of what was going on in the outside world, including the pandemic. But as months went on and I kind of came back to planet Earth and had an idea of what was happening in the outside world, I saw the effect that the pandemic was having on people, and also how it was affecting disasters, because there were still hurricanes going on and there were still major wildfires. I believe both California, as always, and Oregon were on fire, and I knew that there was a severe need for disaster workers, but because of the pandemic, they just didn't have what they needed, and it was really hard for me to watch, knowing that I otherwise would have been an able-bodied person that could have gone to help, and it just really bothered me that I was so useless, and that I would see this need, and I would hear about what was going on and how they needed workers that could safely be in the field, and that wasn't me at the time. And so watching that, and it wasn't good enough for me to not be able to help in the future. And so based on what I was seeing, I made the goal that in 2021 I was going to be deployable no matter what. That is what I am going to work on, is to be deployable. So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the job that I did primarily on national jobs. I worked primarily in safety and security. I started doing that in 2016 with great managers, great mentors. Just had a really great experience doing that. I worked 1 to 2 jobs, usually 2 jobs a year in that, and I would deploy all over the country for things like wildfires and floods, and hurricanes, really mostly hurricanes in my experience. But the biggest part of the job was making sure that people were physically safe. We would identify needs for on-site security at work sites, working with contract security to make sure that they're doing their jobs, identifying hazards, making sure emergency exits remain clear, obvious stuff like that, making sure that the buildings that we were potentially going to be using would meet minimum safety standards. And the biggest part of our job was doing daily site inspections, spending most days just driving all over the place, wherever the work sites are, wherever our assets were located. And the goal is to hit every site every day to stay on top of any safety and security issues. Besides working with life safety, we work to secure our assets. So again, determining the needs for on-site security or overnight security for warehouses, ensuring that work and storage sites were fully vacated, that our physical, like our assets weren't left behind when we were no longer using a facility, stuff like that. Intermixed would be responding to and reporting on major incidences that would happen, including at shelters. Really, there's a lot of problem solving that goes on. You're working with a lot of people that are in distress, and you have to learn how to work with those people through what they're experiencing to get to whatever outcome we need to ensure the safety and security of our people and our assets. What usually gets people involved in safety and security with the Red Cross is actually going to be retired military or law enforcement. For me, it was my degree in emergency management that first got me involved, as opposed to being with law enforcement. So for me, making the commitment and forming my recovery team was the first big step. With 4 years on the job, I was well aware of the physical requirements to do the job. I knew that reliable walking and functional endurance would be my biggest challenges. When I told one of my physical therapists like what my goal was, and this was the beginning of 2021, it was January 2021, kind of a New Year's resolution was that I'm going to be deployable this year. And when I explained to her what that would entail, she made it clear to me that we could not deviate from this goal. We couldn't get distracted with other things, that we basically had 9 months to get me ready at most, and all of our efforts would have to go into that. There was actually one occasion, like a few months later, that I said, hey, I think that I'd like to work towards doing this other thing. And she put me right back in my place, and she was like, nope, we don't have time for that. So it was a very real thing in my recovery. It wasn't, just some idea. It was what the focus was, that I'm going to be deployable in my job. So I'm going to tell you about the physical capacity grid, and it's something that you're going to hear about a lot. So the physical capacity grid is Red Cross's own requirements that they themselves developed that outline the physical minimums that a person should be able to do to complete their job. So every job has different things on this grid that they need to be able to perform. It creates a baseline for physical abilities. It does not mean that a person will perform all of these tasks on a job. There are a number of tasks that I've never completed on any job, but it just sets up that baseline. And before deployment, I dedicated my rehab specifically to the requirements of my job in safety and security. One of those was to be able to stand for 2 hours, and a lot of you joined me at the river for my first 2-hour stand. That was a big deal, and I needed the support to be able to get through it that first time, just to expose my body to it, and everything went beautifully. Another one would be to be able to step up on a step stool or climb a ladder. Well, I wasn't going to be climbing a ladder, though right now I think that I could probably be trained to climb a ladder, but it was an or, it wasn't an and, so stepping up on that step stool was what I worked towards and was able to accomplish prior to deployment. And then the other big one would be walking a mile in a day, but that was more than accomplishable at that point that I ended up deploying. So this ultimately plays a really big part in what all went on. So it was September, the beginning of September, and the day finally arrived for me to deploy. And my recovery team was so excited. Everyone was so excited because we all worked so hard, and we all knew that I was ready. Nobody had reservations about this. We knew that I was ready. So we're just going to start at the beginning of the deployment and go from there. So the first day, everything was awesome. I had all the autonomy in the world. I was responsible for myself, and things were going beautifully. My team was awesome, People treated me like normal, and I helped solve problems. It was a great day. Also, in the morning, I fell. I slipped on a wet floor in the hotel lobby. I wasn't paying attention to the wet floor sign, and as you know, every once in a while, people fall. Anyone could have slipped. I wasn't in the habit of falling or anything like that. I actually very rarely fall. Very rarely. And like everybody else in the world, once in a while something happens. And it just so happens that I didn't see the sign, wet floors, those signs exist for a reason. And I was overweighting on my crutch, and I slipped. I actually had 2 crutches. I brought a spare crutch. I was using one crutch as a habit, but for just in case there was an emergency or I got really tired, I just wanted to have the second crutch in the car with me, so I had that one with me too. I actually, after I fell, I jokingly emailed one of my PTs that I was officially on one crutch because I broke one of them, and so I didn't have that spare, but it was just my spare crutch was just a crutch, for just in case, it was just like a little security blanket. It wasn't even required in the first place, so it was no big deal. So I got up and forgot all about it, and I had the best day with these awesome people, and I was normal, and it was just magic for me. It was just an accident, get up, move on, note to self, pay attention to the signs, and don't overweight on my crutches, pay attention to what you're doing. That's all that there was to it. Oddly to me, in the afternoon, the Red Cross staff MD called me, and I don't know who notified them or what their motivation was, but I got a call from the staff MD. It was a question that was asked and answered. I fell, I got up, I went on with my life, and she's like, cool, so you fell, you got up, and you went on with your life. Yep, okay. Sounds good. There was no challenge to my ability to do the job. Anybody could have a slip, trip, and fall. I'm pretty sure that slip, trip, and falls are like the number one workplace incident in pretty much all fields. Anybody can do it, right? You could fall. So day one was awesome. It was magic. It was just so awesome to be just like treated like a normal human being and work with these great people, and we're just dealing with everyday stuff. My day has nothing to do with my accident. It has nothing to do with my injury. It's just a normal day, and probably essentially the first normal day that I had in, that was around the 18-month mark or something like that. Then on day 2, things got weird. I wasn't assigned in the morning meeting. I wasn't assigned to who my partner was going to be or where I'd be going or anything like that. I was just left off of it. When I asked, I was told to report to headquarters instead. So that definitely got me concerned. My coming on the job, like, so much thought went into this. I was really concerned about perception. Should I go as a supervisor, or should I just go as an associate, as a team member? Should I introduce myself to disability integration, who you're going to hear a lot about disability integration, but it's basically the people that advocate for the disabled and make sure that they're not discriminated against and that their needs are met, whatever that may be. I really just wanted to be normal. I ended up going on the job as just a team member because at that point all the supervisor roles were filled, which was fine, because on the one hand, like, this was all very thoughtful. It was like, well, if I show up as a supervisor, then they know that I have experience, then they just assume that I know what I'm doing, and I don't have to separately establish myself as an experienced person. But on the other hand, this was going to be brand new to me, and did I want to set myself up for a supervisor role, especially if it is a true supervisor role in which, I would be put over something. Did I want to put that pressure on myself? But so much thought went into this, and the perception, and I wanted to make the right decision. It wasn't something that I just took lightly by any means. So here I am without an assignment on the second day. I'm told to meet in headquarters, and I have no idea what's going on. And, here comes the firestorm that I wasn't prepared for. So the first meeting was with my manager, his manager, and then a disability integration person who was on the phone. So disability integration's job is to protect the rights of the disabled, to make sure that their basic needs are met if they need reasonable accommodation, whether that's staff or clients. Disability integration is supposed to be on the side of the disabled person, not necessarily on the side of the Red Cross or some other person or situation or whatever. They are there to advocate. They're there to make sure that disabled people do not get pushed around by bias or harassment, which essentially is exactly what happened to me. So right off the bat in this meeting, they grill me on my fall. I tell them it was no big deal. I overweighted my crutch with my upper body, and my crutch slipped out, and I couldn't catch myself. And no big deal. But they're concerned from purely a biased standpoint. Anyone else not visibly disabled, they fall and it's an accident. Slipping on a wet floor doesn't automatically make me a fall risk. It means I should pay more attention to the wet floor. The staff MD wasn't concerned. And then they set in with, they understand that it's hard to be disabled. And this is where the gaslighting begins. They reassure me that it's okay to be disabled. You can still help when you're disabled. Being at a desk job, it just seems safer. It seems safer to them. They have no professional expertise to make that assumption. Again, the staff MD wasn't even concerned. At no point did they ask me what, if anything, they could do to make my job safer for me. They were not concerned with providing reasonable accommodation. The answer would have been nothing if they had asked me how they could help make the job safer for me. It would have been, going forward, I'll watch out for wet floor signs in the future. They assured me that I can still help people from a desk. They would sleep better having the broken girl at a desk. They were trying to make the change my idea. The broken girl was well versed in her job and knew that she could do her job just fine. Thank you very much. But it's okay. It's okay. It must be so hard. I understand. It's okay to be disabled. You can still help. You can still be a part of this while being disabled. Just, we're more comfortable if you do that from a desk. I defended myself from the first minute. I am more than capable of doing my job. The most physical aspect of my job could be endurance. You're looking at very long days. It could be endurance, not anything independently just physical, just being physically active for 14 hours or 16 hours or whatever. Like, okay, that could make anybody tired, but it would probably make me tired. Driving around and problem solving all day was not out of my wheelhouse. I solve problems by going to the site, assessing the situation, talking to people involved, helping them find a solution, and making reports as necessary. There's a lot more brain business going on than there is physical business, other than, there is a lot of walking around over the course of the day. Reasonable accommodation would have been simple to combat any likely negative possibilities had they asked. But I went there to do my job, prepared to do my job, not even looking for reasonable accommodation or anything like that. And so time is just going on, and they're just there trying to make it my idea, my choice. Like, you know what? I think that you're right. Maybe it would be safer for me to sit at a desk for, 16 hours a day. Maybe that's what I should be doing. No, and no. That was never going to happen. I am here to do my job. I'm not here to do some generic, unskilled job. I'm not here to just help. I want to pitch in. I just want to help these people in need. I'm not that noble, okay? I'm here to do my job. I'm here to do my job. I'm crying. I am crying. I'm a broken record. Anybody can slip and fall on a wet floor. I'm here to do my job. I worked so hard to do my job. I trained to do my job. I end up pleading. I'm crying and I'm pleading, and I'm a broken record of pleading. I am here to do my job. I'm not here to do a job. I'm not here to pitch in. I'm not here to help. Or I am here to do my job. I just want to be normal. I just want to experience me for a minute, and not at anybody's expense. I just want to do my job. And they were relentless. It's okay to be disabled. And they just keep going on and on and on about this. And it's just, hours are going by, and I'm crying, and I can't believe that I'm crying. I'm like embarrassed that I'm crying, and just like, why can't I handle this? This doesn't make any sense. And they didn't have the authority to reassign me without actual cause, and so they worked damn hard to make it my idea to be reassigned. They also knew that I hadn't done anything wrong. Otherwise, they would have taken disciplinary action. Disability integration, the people who were supposed to protect me, they were participating in the gaslighting. Their job was to protect me from discrimination exactly like this, and they're participating. I tell disability what I can do, and they go and act as a go-between with people who think that they know better. That is disability integration's job in a case like this. They have a conversation with me first, and I tell them what I can do. Yes, I can do my job, and they go back to them and say, she can do her job, and that is all there is to it. I don't even have to be in a meeting something like this. They should just be dealing with it themselves, and I should just be off doing my work. I became distressed. I was extremely distressed. I couldn't believe that any of this was happening. I couldn't believe that I couldn't defend myself. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I was crying. The whole thing, it was just unbelievably overwhelming as hours are going by, and it's a horrible, horrible experience to be reduced to nothing more than a disability. It is dehumanizing. It's just my personhood. I never thought in my life that I would ever even relate to my personhood. But to have my personhood reduced to absolutely nothing more than my disability was just unimaginable to me. I just couldn't believe that I got myself into this position in the first place, because I know how to stand up for myself. I know how to handle things. And I was just completely clueless in all of this. I knew that disability integration's job was to protect me, but they weren't. They should have met with me before even agreeing to be in on this meeting. They were violating their own job policies. I later found out that National recognized that disability as a whole on the job, that they weren't doing their job in many ways, and they sent a cherry-picked replacement to clean up that mess. I met that person a few days later, and she was horrified when I told her what happened. I also found out that the disability integration person that was on the phone in the first meeting, she was sick and puking in the bathroom during that call. And in no way was present or capable to perform her role that day. And I'm the one that paid for it. I paid for it. I didn't know what to do. I advocated for myself, but disability integration was supposed to intervene on my behalf, not try to gaslight me too. Red Cross policy says that I decide what I can and cannot do, no one else. I signed my name affirming on the physical capacity grid that I can meet the requirements of that grid. At this point, the conversation should have been over and I should have been allowed to return to my job. But the meeting continued. Hours are passing and they continue to try to make it my idea to take a desk job. Because disability integration wasn't advocating for me like they should, I began asking for an advocate. I want an advocate. I want an advocate. I'm crying. I want to do my job. I want an advocate. I'm an absolute broken record. I want an advocate. I'm here to do my job. I'm crying. I'm embarrassed that I'm crying. I can't believe that I'm crying. I want an advocate. I'm here to do my job. I want an advocate. And it never stops. It's okay to be disabled. It's okay. The physical capacity grid joined the chorus of my broken record. I signed my name acknowledging that I can do the things on the physical capacity grid. Crying some more. I told them to pick anything on the physical capacity grid, and I'll prove that I can do it. What about the physical capacity grid? I signed my name. I'm crying. What about the physical capacity grid? I'm here to do my job. I want an advocate. What about the physical capacity grid? What about the physical capacity grid? I signed my name saying that I could do it. What about the physical capacity grid? Why does it exist if it doesn't mean anything, right? Why wasn't this conversation over? I signed the physical capacity grid. I signed acknowledging that I could meet the physical expectations of my job. And then enters Fryer, the logistics director. It was getting closer to lunchtime and Fryer popped in. She was just checking up on the gaslighting. She played nice to me. She offered to get the staff advocate involved to advocate on my behalf. We ultimately broke for lunch with the understanding that they were going to get the staff advocate to act as an advocate for me and get him lined up to continue on to the next meeting. So the second meeting takes a long time to start. It was set to start at a certain time, and then I was there ready to go, and I sat there and twiddled my thumbs while I waited for others to show up. It turns out that the person that was supposed to advocate for me got called away. So instead, they bring in the staff investigator. And he made it clear that per policy, when he gets involved, he has no choice but to report on his investigation. This was never supposed to be investigated. I certainly didn't ask for someone to come in and investigate me. I asked for an advocate. He tried to convince me that he was my advocate. Before the meeting, he had a 30-minute conversation with my manager. On what planet does an advocate have a private conversation with the aggressor before ever meeting the person that needs an advocate? He confessed that he was brought in to represent my manager, not me. This means that he was actively investigating me. That's the opposite of an advocate. In this meeting was the investigator, Fryer, the logistics director, and a new disability integration person on the phone. In this meeting, the logistics director, Fryer, she became really aggressive. It was just a lot more gaslighting. It's okay to be handicapped. You can still help. More of the broken record. More crying. What about the physical capacity grid? I signed my name. I'm here to do my job. I want an advocate. Clearly, I was not successful in advocating for myself. And now here comes mental health. It wasn't too long into the meeting when the investigator asked if he could bring mental health into the meeting. Why do we need mental health? This isn't a mental health issue. It made zero sense to me, but he asked if he could bring in mental health. He said that it was required per policy for him and any of his investigations to involve health services, which would have been the staff MD, and mental health in every investigation. He asked if it was okay, when all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, and in pops a person, mental health. What do you know? She was already coming. There was no question. It was not, is it okay if we bring in mental health? She was already on her way. It was so pointless for her to be there. She just sat there and listened to all of this nonsense. Later I found out that she had no idea why she was brought in there. She didn't have experience with the staff investigator as a habit or anything like that. Maybe the investigator thought that mental health would do a better job at gaslighting me. But really, she just sat there awkwardly, like, why am I here? Eventually, I was told that they would find a new disability integration advocate for me. But in the same breath that I was told that they were going to find a disability integration person for me, I was told that really, disability integration does not deal with staff issues, and they had more important things to do. Helping staff is 100% a part of their job. That was an outright lie, and she knew it. We're talking about a high-level manager. She knew that she was lying. She was caught ultimately in many lies. This isn't a low-level job where sometimes people don't have as much experience or anything like that. No, she's a high-level manager on a high-level job. She knows how these things work. And lying is how she got the nickname Friar. Friar the liar, right? Clever, huh? Still makes me laugh. Friar tried to wrap things up for the night. It was starting to get later in the afternoon, and Friar wanted to call it a day. I said, there is no way that I am leaving without resolution. I don't need to be wondering all night long, what the fuck is gonna happen to me tomorrow? Like, this is bullshit. Friar tried to convince me just to be done with it until tomorrow. And she was straight up mean about everything in this meeting. And I wouldn't have it. There was no way. It was so unfair. I've already been put through 6 hours of meetings, and now I have to wonder. I wasn't about to spend the night that way. It would have been horrible for me to not know what was going to happen. I requested a meeting with my manager. I said that all of this was so overblown and unnecessary. I wanted the opportunity to comfort my manager. I wanted to make him feel better, right? I just needed to convince him that I was able-bodied for my job. He doesn't need to worry his pretty little head about me. If only I could soothe his fear. Friar strongly discouraged it, but I wouldn't back down. We move on to meeting number 3, so it's late in the afternoon. I'm pretty sure that in this meeting it was just Friar, my manager, and the investigator. I attempted to soothe my manager's concerns. There was less crying. He acted completely innocent, like he only ever was concerned for my safety. He stated that if I had come with a note from my personal doctor, it would have been a lot easier. I told him I could absolutely get him a doctor's note. He said it wasn't necessary. I told him to pick anything on the physical capacity grid, and I would prove to him that I could do it. He didn't feel that was appropriate. He felt making those asks would be invasive. Yet what they did to me for 6 hours wasn't invasive? All of this was like an interrogation. My manager was calmer And I was promised a new disability integration person who would actually be trained in their job for the following day. It was decided that we would pick things back up in the morning and just press pause for the night, and I would have an advocate. I would have a disability integration person ready to advocate for me the next day. I would have been exhausted at this point. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. It was awful. It was so traumatic. I was humiliated. I was humiliated that I was exposed to this. And I was humiliated that I didn't know what to do. Like, I felt helpless. And that's just not a normal thing for me. It was just horrible. For someone who doesn't cry all that much, despite nearly dying and spending 2 years in painful recovery, I had never cried so much. I cried so much, and I was embarrassed and ashamed for it. Why? I'm embarrassed to say that I was embarrassed that I was embarrassed for crying. It was just so degrading. It was so degrading. I was ashamed that I didn't know how to navigate the situation myself. So I went back to my hotel for the night and waited to report to headquarters the following morning. Day 3, I went to work expecting to report to headquarters. Instead, I was intercepted in the hotel lobby by a teammate. Our manager had said that I would be partnered with him for that day. My manager didn't say a word to me about any of this. However, if my manager really thought that I was in danger, he probably wouldn't have let me go out in the field, regardless of who I was partnered with. What the day had in store for me ended up being just as magical as day 1. I was treated normal, just working with my teammates, going about my business, except for the side of fear that was nagging me all day. Besides helping solve problems all day long, I got to sit in fear as we drove from worksite to worksite because I had no idea what was going on with everything else. The day ended with not so much as a peep from my manager. I didn't hear a word. It was a great day, just as great as day 1, like just me being me, going about my business. But I had no clue what was going on. Day 4, it ended up being more of the same. Again, I was intercepted by a teammate in the hotel lobby. Again, my manager didn't say a word about this to me. It was more of the same. Helping solve problems, being treated like a normal person, magic. But I still had no resolution. And the lack of resolution brought fear. In the afternoon, I texted my manager saying I wanted resolution. I had no idea what was actually going on. I felt like a kid that was being collected by a parent each morning. I received a text from the investigator to report to headquarters when I got back into town. And that leads directly into meeting number 4. This meeting was Fryer and the investigator, and I don't believe that there was anybody else for that. They proceeded to tear me to shreds. Couldn't I just be happy working? I mean, I was working, that's what I wanted to do, wasn't it? They wanted me to forget about the prior harassment. I was seriously taking away from the mission at that point. They made it clear that I am taking away from the mission, that I wasted so many people's time. There were actual victims from this hurricane, and I was personally taking away from that. Fryer said she knows that I can't do everything on the physical capacity grid. She just knew it as a matter of fact, right? Fryer the liar. She just lied to me again. She said that she sent my situation so far up the flagpole that it went to National. And National said they didn't care and to just deal with it. And it was sent back down. She shrugged her shoulders, saying if National doesn't care, then she doesn't care. On top of all of this, there was an odd component in this meeting. Fryer and the investigator seemed to be lining up their stories on completely meaningless points. It was really, really weird. It was like And the sky was blue. Yes, the sky was blue. And it's like, what does it matter that the sky is blue, right? I mean, that's kind of how irrelevant it was, why they were just lining certain things up and clarifying certain points between each other was just very odd to me. Basically, at the end of it, I mean, they tore me to shreds. Like, I was doing nothing but taking away from the mission. And I left the meeting in tears, believing that I would be sent home the next day. Like, I was under the impression that they were done with me. They're just going to send me home. They couldn't get me to take a desk job, so they're just going to send me home. And I was in tears. I was beside myself. I was just in shock, and I cried and cried and cried. At that point, I decided to reach out to the person in charge of deploying people back home. I was in tears as I dialed her number. I told her, first off, I was probably going to cry my way through this phone call, and she was fine with that. To my surprise, I stopped crying and I became angry. I colorfully told her about what happened to me in microscopic detail over 2 hours. She was horrified. She recommended first that I try to bump into the job director the next morning. That was not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I would try. She said that if they do send me home, not to worry. This wasn't okay, and they would take care of it after I got home. And I trusted her, and I went to sleep. So, day 5. This leads to a small miracle after meeting number 5. I barely walked into headquarters, and I just happened to bump into the job director. I requested an audience with him, which he granted immediately. Right when I got into things, the job director stopped me. Wait, I told them to leave you alone. Why are you here? Nothing went to national. Why would I send this to national? That's a lie. I told them that the only person who decides that you cannot do the job is you. You signed the physical capacity grid, so that is it. I fell off my chair this morning. I wasn't paying attention and I fell off of it. People fall from time to time. I told them to send you back to work and to leave you alone. I spoke with mental health and she said you were great. I explained to him how weird Fryer and the investigator were acting, and he immediately said, they're getting their stories to straight. He caught Fryer in other lies too. He was totally shocked about all of this because he told them immediately, as soon as they just got into my situation, he told them to knock it off, that if I said that I was okay, then I was okay, and that's all that there was to it. So this was all a surprise to him. He apologizes profusely. He clearly felt terrible. He was clearly not happy, but he told me that I would have to trust him. Disciplinary actions are private matters. I understood that. I just said that I really want lessons learned from this, including everyone involved in what happened. I said that Fryer and the investigator, they need more than lessons learned. Like, they were terrible. And I reiterated that I understood that I wouldn't know anything about that. This job director is a highly respected, high-ranking, paid staff member. I found out later that he has actually been promoted to a national job now. I was more than satisfied with our conversation. He was very caring. He was very supportive. He answered my questions about what happened between day 2 and now. I had no reason not to believe him, that he would take care of it. He made it clear that he would get with all parties involved and make sure that this never happened again. And so my day carried on like magic. I went to work, I worked with my teammates, and everything was normal. I was normal and just having a great day. I text the person that I spoke with, the deployment coordinator. I text her and I told her, thanks for advising me to speak to the job director, that went great, and now we're just moving on. So
Now we're at today's 6 through 10. They were magical. I got to do my job. I got to problem solve. I got to be respected. Nobody cared that I walked with a crutch. My disability was 100% irrelevant in my job. Every day that I worked, I knew that I helped in some meaningful way. One shelter had a family taking over space in front of a fire extinguisher. Instead of kicking them out resentfully, with them likely to just return to the space anyways, I recognized that this place was special for them, what was special about this place, and I found ways that we could make minor adjustments and open up the space necessary to access the extinguisher, and they understood, and everything was happy. A big part of this is just respecting people for what they're going through. At another shelter, an at-risk person got away from his escort to a store. Leaders, including from support organizations, didn't know what to do. The Red Cross was not responsible for what happened, but we were definitely not going to do nothing. Standard operating procedures do not allow Red Crossers to transport clients under any circumstances. Red Cross will hire contract transporters for this task, but it was unknown how fast that might happen. So I asked the support organizations if they had policies in place that prohibit transporting clients. One person responded no. I told them immediately that they are going to grab someone and leave immediately. They're going to go to that store where he was last seen at, and they are going to find this shelter resident that is missing. And she immediately stood up, ready to go. It was at that point that we were notified that the shelter resident had been located and was returned via a contract shuttle that was already arranged. And he was dropped off back at the shelter. So that action didn't need to be taken. But prior to that, they were just standing around looking at each other. We lost this guy. What are we going to do? And it's like, okay, we're going to make decisions and we're going to take action. That's what we're going to do. My favorite story turned into a really long day for us. We were just arriving back in Baton Rouge when we got a call from the manager. Something huge had happened involving Mace and a baby. We immediately headed to that shelter to find out what was going on. The shelter was preparing for a contentious closing. Disasters are messy. Local politics play a role. Stressful meetings were already being held about this closing, so some higher-ups from the job were already on site. I'm not going to pretend to remember every single detail or the order of operations precisely. Long story short, there was a domestic fight between a family staying in the shelter and another family who came in. Contract security was not on site since the facility never needed it before. Law enforcement, who stopped by periodically, were not around during this incident. The brawl was broken up by shelter staff and residents, and some of those people, they ended up getting maced too during this incident, along with the baby. All of these events left a lot of traumatized witnesses, including staff. The staff did an awesome job dealing with all of this, but they were tired, they were hungry, and they wanted to be done with it. The problem then became a matter of policy. I won't go into policy details, but this family, who was just traumatized, needed a place to go, and staying in the shelter after all that had happened just wasn't an option. Staff and shelter residents alike, they couldn't feel confident that there wouldn't be another incident, so the decision was made to send them to a hotel. The problem was funding through proper channels. One higher up on site for the shelter close, she kept quoting policy over and over again, saying that there was no way that we could put them in a hotel. The shelter manager, who was actually from North Idaho, was at her wit's end. She just wanted the riddle solved. Like, what are we going to do? We have to do something. Let's just get this worked out. Lots of conversations were happening. One conversation in particular drew my interest. I didn't know who the lead talker was, but he sounded like he was important. So I asked, "Who are you?" And he looks at me and he's like, "I'm the deputy job director." Oh, big cheese. Okay then, note to self. That's why this guy is talking with authority. I continued popping in on conversations, and I heard from witnesses, including staff that intervened. Circling back to the manager having a chat about policy, without processing who she was talking to, I chimed in. There has got to be discretionary. I realized who I was talking to, the deputy job director. They didn't need my ideas. He knew what was going on, and so I immediately stopped talking. But the deputy director, he redirected me back to what I was saying. He wanted to know, no, continue what you were about to say. There has got to be discretionary funds somewhere. Shelter managers have access to $50 for emergencies, for miscellaneous things that somebody needs to run to the store and grab, and they can't do it through proper channels. So there's got to be money somewhere that we can draw from that is not going to be a policy violation. This is an emergency, and there has got to be funds that we can pull together for this without breaking policy. We have to do something. He said immediately that was a good idea. The shelter manager, she mouthed thank you to me. Finally, we were getting somewhere. To my surprise, this didn't end things immediately. The deputy director continued listening to other people's conversations. The broken record of policy violation would not stop playing. She just kept going that's a policy violation. That's a policy violation. And the shelter manager was still distressed because she thought that we were, she thought that we had a path forward, and now we didn't know what was going on. Finally, the deputy director is enough. He immediately coughed up his job credit card, which I didn't even know he had one. And the broken record was super grumpy. She worked directly under him, but there was nothing that she would be able to do it at this point. Her chain of command, her cash flow was all clear. It wasn't going to have anything to do with her. I suspected that he let all of this go on for so long as a teaching moment, that we all had to work through this. We had to think things through. We had to get creative. So then comes the next problem, transportation. We know that we cannot transport people. We can't transport clients. So I suggest Uber, and immediately the deputy director is well, that's exactly what we're going to do. I asked the shelter manager if she had Uber or Lyft on her phone, and she replied, I'm taking my team to dinner and we're done. Good luck. I asked the shelter manager if she had Uber or Lyft on her phone, and she replied, I'm taking my team and we are going to dinner. Good on her for delegating, really. That was the right decision for her to make. So I asked the deputy director, an older man, if he had Uber. He said, I don't have Uber. You are the one who is going to do this. And so I complied. The rest of the story is not smooth or easy, but we did finally get the family a hotel. The details of that, they don't matter. But I felt accomplished for that day. I had done something meaningful, and it had nothing to do with my disability. It was awesome. We got back to our hotel around 10 or 11, and we agreed that we were going to sleep in an extra hour the next morning. So let's talk about the baseless black eye that I would be going home with. Day 11. So you understand that we're working in safety and security here. And above our physical assets are going to be life safety, right? So we had one extremely vulnerable staff shelter. It was an old private school campus in the middle of a neighborhood. It might have been a great venue for an actual staff shelter that had a good-sized population with people coming and going. But in this particular case, it only had 4 to 5 nurses and the shelter manager, and that was it. Previously, it was a legit shelter, but the significant portion of those people were given an opportunity to stay at a resort in another town, and these nurses needed to be a lot closer to area shelters, and it didn't make sense for them. So given the size of the campus and how relatively isolated it was, no one was comfortable with the life safety issues it created. Even the shelter manager wasn't comfortable with it. She became a volunteer at a client shelter because she was afraid to be at the staff shelter by herself. So we're all volunteers here, right? But we all take our jobs very seriously. Like, our job is our job. So she was volunteering separately from her actual job as a staff manager. She was volunteering at a client shelter nearby during the days because she wasn't comfortable being alone in the staff shelter by herself, which ordinarily, because staff may be in and out throughout the day, the shelter manager is going to be there during the day also. She expressed her concern multiple times. One day, a homeless person actually followed her into the school. She was really calm about it, and she was casually able to talk to him and walk back out the school and separate herself from there. But that right there just shows how compromised this location was in the first place. Every time that I visited that shelter, my partner would comment that he would never have his wife or his daughter stay in a place like that. And these are with multiple partners, but none of them were comfortable with that. One actually offered to return to the shelter, which was a multi-hour drive to get to in the first place. After we returned back from our job at the end of the day, that he would turn around and go back to secure that school. But of course, our job is not to actually act as security. We would normally get contract security for something like that, or law enforcement. We already had information from local law enforcement to contract security through them for a very reasonable price. So transactions like that are very common on jobs. Sometimes contract security is a security firm of some kind, and a lot of times it's actually local law enforcement that in their spare time is doing contract security. Reports were written about this every day. One day we actually discovered that one of the many doors to the facility had actually been unlocked, and it had been unlocked the entire time and nobody had realized it. This is the type of thing that needs to be addressed immediately. Just right when it happens, it's a life safety issue. There was chatter that maybe the shelter was going to get closed, or they might decide to repopulate it, but these were just rumors. Chatter doesn't solve a life safety issue. When we have a life safety issue, that needs to be addressed now, not eventually. It might close this weekend does not deal with a current life safety issue. The homeless person should have been the last straw. Getting contract security is not a big deal. It's not a big deal. So this shouldn't have been an issue at any point. So I got an idea. Clearly, nothing was being done by my manager. Even whatever he was working on, he wasn't accomplishing anything. So what about the shelter manager's supervisor? That person would work at headquarters and have influence. My original plan was to coach the shelter manager to reach out to her manager. Experience told me that it's not unheard of for a shelter manager to have no clue who their direct supervisor is. They're just out there in the field going about their business, and they don't actually know who they're working under. Experience also told me that shelter managers think that because they've spoken about safety and security with us, because that's our job, that they don't need to advise their own supervisor on what's happening in the shelter. So I knew that my manager would lose it if I reached out to her supervisor. I've done that countless other times with lots of different managers. Usually the manager is grateful that a problem has been dealt with, but I knew that that would piss him off. And sure enough, I was right on both counts. She wasn't sure who her supervisor was, and she had not been communicating safety issues to the person that she was assuming was her supervisor. So I asked her to give this person a call, and we would just verify their position. It's not unheard of for someone to think that they are speaking to their direct supervisor, but it's actually some random person on the job that has been passing information along to them, or maybe mentoring them or something like that, but they're not in any way, shape, or form in the chain of command that person's in at all. So we did confirm that she was in contact with the correct supervisor. So that's great. At this point, we're on the phone together, all three of us. It made zero sense to have her hang up and call him back a minute later. He wanted to know why the shelter manager had called in the first place. We all had a conversation about the security issues. He expressed surprise on all accounts of the security issues, and he expressed concern. I suggested that since he was already at headquarters, that he could meet up with my manager, who was also at headquarters, and then we could reduce the go-between with the field, and they could talk to each other and work this out. A few hours later, when we were visiting the client shelter that the staff shelter manager was volunteering at during the day, she was so excited. She had already heard back from her supervisor and things were in the works. She now had information and felt more comfortable that things are moving in the right direction. So mission accomplished, right? Like now more people are aware, the shelter manager feels more comfortable. She knows who she's talking to and what she can talk to him about, and we're headed the right direction. So mission accomplished. So now comes the fun part. The official verbal reprimand sent via email. Hours later, in complete violation of policy, I received the email from my manager. First, it makes it clear to me what my job is and what it isn't, and that I am absolutely forbidden from interacting with headquarters. There was a whole lot of how dare you. How dare you deal with an immediate life safety problem? How dare you? I am the manager. Next, he issues me the official verbal reprimand for my great transgression of dealing with an immediate life safety issue. His manager was copied to this email. Policy said that first he should have a conversation with the team member in question. What led to this conversation? Why did you make that decision? Next time would be a coaching session. I'm not sure what you've seen on other jobs. Usually you would avoid interacting with headquarters when not strictly necessary. Blah, blah, blah. If there are further issues, a verbal reprimand may be necessary. I'm not positive, but I think a verbal reprimand is supposed to be verbal. A team member should be well aware that a reprimand is coming. It should never come out of nowhere. It should not be a surprise. They should have seen it coming a mile away. Several conversations should have already taken place. I was livid. He couldn't get me kicked off of the job, so this is what he's got. Retaliation. He went out of his way to ignore me, and now he's really showing me who's boss. We had almost no interactions since the day 2 meetings. And so I sent my first email telling him to fall off a cliff. After what you did to me? In video number 3, I will read them to you. I've got no shame after everything they put me through, after everything that they did to me. Now this. I informed him that I would be leaving the job. I have had enough of this harassment. I would be leaving the job 2 days early, which was unusual, but not unheard of, especially after the way that I had been treated. I requested my flight home, and I checked out of the job remotely, which was customary on this job. Fryer twice tried to force me to report to headquarters. Didn't give a valid reason to do so, and I absolutely refused. I had no business at headquarters. I could get my flight and check out of the job remotely. There was no way I would be dealing with these monsters again. The investigator texted me, making sure everything was set for me to leave the job. My reply, I'm still waiting for that apology. I was on my way to the airport when I was informed, without so much as a conversation, that I was terminated on the grounds of using profanity in an email. Something about a hostile work environment. What an insane joke. I've got nothing to hide. This has been so devastating and deeply traumatic. Being reduced to absolutely nothing more than a disability, the only additional characteristic likely applied to me was pain in the ass, because I defended myself relentlessly. Make this illegal. The discrimination that I endured is completely legal because volunteers aren't covered by Title I of the ADA. Make what happened to me count for something. Don't let it be nothing. Don't let it be just this horrible, horrible thing that happened. Make it count for something. Tell your U.S. House representative to extend Title I of the ADA to volunteers now. What happened to me undoubtedly has happened to others. These are not the only ignorant assholes out there prepared to inflict so much harm to a person just trying to live their life in the best way that they're able to. It's been 15 months, and I am still just as traumatized as I was that first day. I haven't healed, I haven't recovered, and I haven't overcome this. I wake up in the middle of the night reliving this. How can this be? How can the Red Cross stand by this? How could this have happened? I'm in just as much pain today as I was when this first happened. People who knew me personally threw me under the bus. Please, please, please make what happened to me count for something. Tell Congress to extend Title I of the ADA. Do it for me. Do it for your disabled family member or your disabled friend. Do it because it's the right thing to do. I don't care if you believe that Congress cares about your letter. Do it anyways. Write the letter. I don't care if you don't know me personally. Do it anyways. I don't care if you know me and don't particularly like me. Do it anyway. Don't leave this for someone else to do. Every letter means something to this victim. Every letter. Make what happened to me count for something. Tell Congress to extend Title I of the ADA to the entire workforce, paid or not. See my video 1 for more information on how Title I can help disabled volunteers. See my video number 3 for the emails that I sent, because I have nothing to hide.